Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking with a cinematographer. His credits include Winter's Bone, BOSCH, and Mayor of Kingstown. We're pleased to welcome Michael McDonough. Michael, thank you for doing this.
Oh, no, it's great to be here.
Where are you right now?
I'm in New York.
Ah.
I was just finishing up a season in Pittsburgh of Mayor of Kingstown. And
right.
I got a script in the last week of production there. Ended up in New York. So it's nice
right.
to be back.
Well, we'd like to ask you, how did you get to where you are today? You grew up in Scotland, right? So that's a big jump. How did it happen that you ended up where you are?
Oh, yeah. Grew up in Scotland. My father was a welder in the shipyards, worked in Clydeside. And my brothers were all engineers. And for some reason, I was just, from an early age, I was good at drawing. And it was kind of encouraged in the house. Through high school, art was kind of my main art, geography, history were my main interests. Towards the end of high school, my art teachers came to the house and made a big pitch to my parents to, encourage me to go to art school as opposed to going down maybe a technical route. I remember getting 100% in my technical drawing class, and for a hot second, I thought I'd be like a naval architect or something.
Oh, wow.
I have to thank my art teachers for coming in and saying, no, this is a better route.
Yeah, that's great. I can't have imagined anybody doing that back in my time. But anyway. So what did your family think about you going to the art college?
It wasn't something, we weren't a house full of books. It was definitely not within their kind of purview, within their general experience.
Yeah.
But, there was kind of encouragement for being good at something. And I could draw.
Yeah.
And it felt like the natural thing for me to do. So I ended up going to Glasgow School of Art. I did undergraduate fine art, kind of specializing in printmaking, screen print, lithography, etching. And it kind of comes back to me now that they're all process-based art forms. You go through a series of steps. There's no instant gratification and no instant creativity generally. You plan, you prep, you create a series of things, and you end up over a timescale with a fine art print. And I kind of see that that's my comfort zone, and that's probably what got me into filmmaking, because it's very much the same. You have to prep it. You have to understand all of the steps and how it will affect each other, for the finished outcome.
Yeah. That's interesting. My love when I was at art college was actually etching. I did lithography as well, but I loved etching, and then I found photography. But that's quite a shift, though, isn't it, in terms of the culture of printmaking and the culture of filmmaking?
Yeah, it was, I got more and more into photography. I was using it to make these quite detailed 3-color separation screen print. It got quite technical. The late, great Tim Mara was my professor at Royal College. So I was kind of moving into this photographic realm. And then I went to Rome, to the British School, to do a year's scholarship in printmaking. And I spent about 2 weeks. I remember vividly taking a photograph from a newspaper of Italian politician's hand, and I blew it up until I could really see the dot matrix. I transferred it to a sheet of linoleum, and I sat there cutting out all the negative space and leaving the dots raised for about 2 weeks. And I thought, what the hell am I doing? Rome is at the front door. I remember loving, when I was at art school in Glasgow, the Glasgow Film Theatre, the GFT was just down the street. And I saw so many amazing films. Werner Herzog, and I remember Belly of an Architect, and I loved that film. And so here I am in Rome, and I'm thinking, what am I doing in this north-facing studio, cutting out a piece of linoleum? So I started to explore the city more. I just took a notebook, stills camera. It was actually an RB67, which I loved, a medium format Mamiya. And I had been shooting previously a lot of Fuji Velvia, which is the Fuji Ektachrome equivalent. And I just started taking that out. And there were many buses that I could take in the middle of Rome, and it would take me to the terminus at the end. And I would kind of see how Romans really lived and just make notes, take photographs, listen to the Pet Shop Boys on my headphones. This was like around 1991, 92. And I think I discovered it. And so I started thinking, writing more. Maybe there were poems, writing, taking photographs, connecting the writing and the images in my head. And then I discovered an English bookstore. I think it's an English bookstore. And these Faber and Faber film books was already a great collection of published books, of screenplays and other books. And Rome's an incredibly cinematic city. I knew where Fellini lived. He lived on the top floor apartment of the street that I walked in all the time. And I started just feeling, as much as art had driven me, my creativity for years, and as much as seeing great collections of art would move me, I did a trip to see all of Paolo Uccello's Battle of San Romano's. There's one in the National Gallery in London, one in the Louvre, and one, I think, in the Uffizi. And I saw them all on one trip. And it's a moving experience. That was kind of the beginnings of perspective, understanding. But I kind of started to come to the conclusion that almost every time I go to the cinema, if I make the right choice, I'm moved in so many different ways. You have photography, of course. You've got the writing aspects, the costume, the makeup, the music, the sound. Like, all of these art forms are kind of pushed together every time you make a project. And I thought, what a really unique, universal kind of creative language film was. And started to think, how can I transition into film?
So what did you do?
Well, a couple of things happened. A sculptor friend of mine, who was a neoclassical sculptor in Scotland when I was studying, Sandy Stoddart, he came out to Rome with a small television crew to make a film, to make a 30-minute documentary for Scottish television about it. And I kind of became the enabler. I became the guy who was on the ground and could get things organized. And I worked with one of these scholars at the British School where I was, who was an architect, and he could drive. I couldn't drive at the time. And we rented a van and we went to various places like the Capitoline Museum, the Vatican museums. And basically then, and maybe still now, you can just pay your way in. You can bribe a guard, and then you go and do some work. And so basically, we kind of arranged unique access to be able to go in and film some pieces to camera, as they call it, and some GVs within the Vatican Museum and the Capitoline when it was out of general tourist hours, but it was close to the public, basically. And we got this brilliant couple of days of filming. And then I would sit with them at night in restaurants and we would talk over. And I watched the camera guy with his Betacam, a sound engineer who was recording and booming, a producer and a director and talent. And I just thought, this is interesting. I could do this. Towards the end of that trip, I went to Cinecittà Studios, just on an open day to the public, and I wandered around, and it just kind of blew me away. And I came away from Rome, kind of putting my printmaking interests off to one side and thinking, how can I get into film?
So what was your answer? How could you get into film?
The next step was I did a little bit of work with the TV company that had done the film in Rome. I did a little bit of editing, some art pieces together that they had. I started to think about writing. I applied to the NFTS and got an interview for cinematography. I was feeling cinematography because of my photo and art background felt like the natural step. Yeah. And I went down to the interview, and the first thing they did was hand me a 100-page multiple choice questionnaire on the history of film and cinematography and questions like, lighting and amperages. And I basically, I think I got one question right. And I mean, I could actually, I would love to take that test today and see if I can get it right.
Wow. I know I would never get anywhere near it.
I completely flopped it.
When I applied, I mean, it was nothing like that. I mean, I got rejected. The
first time.
I went to see Colin Young, who was principal then, and I put it to him straight. I said, why didn't you accept me? I mean, it was like, but I never had any asked any tests like that. Wow.
Well, it was eye-opening. It was like it showed me instantly what I didn't know. I appreciated that. I had an interview. It was a really nice interview. I got a nice letter from Paul Wheeler saying that I should, they really appreciate me coming down, but I should stick to being a video artist.
Oh, wow.
And then at the same time, I had applied because I understood about various colleges in America. I had done some art exhibitions here in the States, and I applied to NYU and I applied to CalArts. The late, great Sandy McKendrick was teaching at CalArts.
Oh, yeah, wow. Yeah.
And Chris Malkovich was the camera tutor, and he wrote the book that I ended up studying, cinematography. A couple of things happened. I got accepted into NYU because they were just looking for creativity. They looked for some writing samples, some examples of your art.
All right.
And a kind of just, a thesis on why you're interested. And it was a graduate program.
Right. So no technical test about amperage and stuff.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, all right, good. Yeah.
But it was great. It was a great way to approach it. It was a way to bring creative people in.
Yeah.
And I was accepted there. And interestingly, I was accepted in CalArts, but there had been the North Ridge earthquake had happened. The school was pretty shaken up. Sadly, Sandy Kennedy died around that time, and I didn't know how to drive, which was probably the biggest reason I didn't go to California.
Yeah, right.
That's a big reason.
I knew I could navigate around New York quite easily. So I went to NYU grad school. That was kind of the beginnings of all of that. And interestingly, probably in the first week, sitting in one of the lectures, sitting next to me was Debra Granik, who I've gone on to work with, for all of my career since.
Yeah.
And we were just kind of, I guess, a little bit older than some of the other students, a couple of years more advanced than them because we maybe done other things before getting into grad school. And, we just kind of felt like we were kindred spirits, I guess.
Yeah. It's great how sort of just kind of accidents work out, don't they? It's serendipity or whatever the word is. Yeah. Yeah. Was it what you expected going to film school?
I didn't know what to expect. I kind of, I look back on it and I thought I would have got a really great training in cinematography at the NFTS. I'm absolutely convinced of that. New York was more about the first week they give you a 2C, I think. Not a 2C, sorry, a 16 mil, a little ARRI, 3-lens turret ARRI. And they give you some black and white reversal film. They show you how to load it and off you go. And so that was kind of, you go into Ocean Square Park, you set up the camera and you start shooting some things. You send it off to the lab, and because it's reversal, pretty quickly, where things are right and where things are wrong.
Yeah.
And that was kind of our first year there.
Yeah.
And I have to admit that it was hard for me to kind of wrap my head around some of the physics of it all, the chemistry of it all, the science of it all. But one of the best things that happened was I got a teaching assistantship. It was kind of the only way I could stay at school. That was the only way I could afford to stay there. I was lucky to get that after my first year. And then going into my second year, when I'm assisting a professor teaching film class, I'm basically repeating all the things I had done in the first year. And that really got it inside my head. That really, it started to make sense when I'm trying to explain it to someone else as opposed to take it in myself.
I think it's great that you started off, your art teacher supported you so much and your family did. I mean, I read, I don't know if it's true, but I read that your parents remortgaged their ex-council house to pay for you to go to film school. Is that right?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty damn good.
Yes, it's absolutely. I think everyone's story, how they got into film, is unique, and within degrees, and the fact that I didn't come from a film background, and maybe the one good thing that Margaret Thatcher did was allow some people to get on the housing ladder in the UK that wouldn't have done it otherwise. And my parents, were able to buy their council house. And then they were able to use that to help me get enough for 1 year at NYU. That loan got me through that first year. And then, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have been able to go on any further if a couple of people hadn't helped me at that stage. The vice principal of NYU was a Scotsman. He went on to become the Chancellor of Aberdeen University. But I remember getting taken in by the Dean of Students, Eleanor Pinto-Simon, who was an amazing educationalist. And she took me in and introduced me to him on the top floor of the building. And he wrote me a letter saying, you can't kick Michael out of school for lack of funds. So again, like another big leg up in my life, and both of those people at NYU was staff members, and then I was able to, I was luckily got the teaching assistantship, and so then the next 3 years were paid for by teaching 20 hours a week.
Right.
Twofold: the teaching helps me, helps others, and it allows me to stay financially. It allows me to see out the program.
How did you, when you left film school, how did you make connections in the industry? I mean, I guess you started, the first thing you did was with Debra, right?
Yeah, we had a fantastic professor, Boris Fruman, who studied with Tarkovsky, and he really taught us about European filmmaking a lot. He showed us a lot of great examples. I don't want to hear your stories, these grand stories. I want you to show me that you can tell a simple story, and then we'll get bigger. And I want you to go to Vignoli and show me how they make a cannoli. Take a video camera, and in 20 shots, show me the process about how this cannoli gets made. And those were kind of there was a lot of rolling of eyes in our classmates. But Debra and I really loved that process, and that led to a lot of, I ended up doing documentary work, and Debra's done a lot of documentary work. And it was kind of this learn how to see the world and then learn how to put that together in a way that other people can understand it. And then when you add on top of that, the drama that's going to come later, the kind of scripted drama, hopefully those things that you're making will be more believable, because you're coming at it from a sense of what does the world look like? How can we film this in a way that will be realistic? So we kind of went through all 3 years of film school with that approach.
And then you made Snake Feed with her, right?
Yeah. Again, it was maybe part of the kind of film versus digital, but we were working a lot with digital cameras, small digital cameras, and doing a lot of exercises that way. And then it came to make the class project, the final project, and it felt appropriate. We had a 16mm package and our Flex 2, I think, SR2. And we shot Snake Feed, which was a story about we were making another small documentary piece for a classwork upstate New York, and in a hotel. And this cleaner came in, and she was just a force of nature, Corinne. And she came in and she had a duster stuck in the back of her jeans, and she was cleaning around. And Debra just instantly swung onto her and put her mental lens on her. And at the end of that little bit of filming, Debra went off and spent the weekend. I think I remember she spent the weekend with her, like July 4th weekend, with her and her family, just videotaping the family. And that turned into probably 3 years worth of videotaping with family. And then that became... that was all transcribed into something like it was like a phone book. It was like 500 pages of stories and dialogue and this scene happened and scene description. And then that was edited down into still phone book size, but like probably a 200-page script. And that became our first feature, and it was cast. The actual original characters played parts in the film, but actors were cast, and became our first proper feature, down to the bone. And Vera Farmiga was the lead. Hugh Dillon, who crazily I'm working with, and Mayor Kingston.
Wow. Yeah.
Mayor Kingston is his show 20 years later.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it was a great experience. It was scrappy, but it felt real, like to us, the world, because the world was real. It was truly based on things people had said.
Right.
places.
Yeah, you really get that from the film. I mean, we really admire that film. I think it's quite wonderful. It's pretty unique in a way, isn't it? So how were you shooting it? I mean, were you just shooting? You know what I mean? Was it just like, we'll just go? Or were things constructed?
It was constructed. It was scripted, as I say, based on all these real incidents, and then they were put together. There was a script writing process that was to create a dramatic arc and scenes. And we had been shooting with a VX 1000, and then we got a Sony VX 2000. This was the latest thing, and I purchased.
Twice as good, right?
I purchased a PAL variant so that we got 625 lens of resolution instead of 525, which caused some issues when we were trying to do the 3-2 fold down later to go to film. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. And then to try and make it cinematic, I really pushed for, we put a PS Technic adapter on the front and some Zeiss super speed lenses. So that I built, it's kind of a Frankenstein kind of rig, but I took an old 16 VL mount, broke it apart and stuck it on my shoulder and put some dumbbell weights on one end and the camera on the other. And I was able to do this kind of nicely. I could take my hands away and it sit on my shoulder. It would go anywhere.
All right.
And then it was, I could follow the cast around with a 25mm lens. There was suddenly some real separation between cast in the background, and it started to feel still scrappy, but a bit more cinematic.
So you were always operating, and Debra said to ask you about about the lack of using tracks and the fact that she liked light fall off, so you didn't have to worry about lighting backgrounds at night.
Yeah, a lot of things. I mean, look, you aspire. I would go and watch films being shot in Washington Square Park. I remember Andrew Dunn shooting there when I was a student. I'm just blown away by what he was doing. I remember NYPD Blue was a kind of favorite of mine, and Brian Reynolds. I spent a couple of days on set watching what the amazing things they did. But at the same time, this other process was, how can we make this as simply and kind of cleanly as possible? And, I don't think I've done one dolly shot in all the films I've done with Debra, and she hated it. we never used it.
That's great.
It was really all about finding other ways to do it, and really, and I sort of feel like starting to, try and understand the way you've been working over time, Roger. And it's about that sense of being close to someone, like feeling like putting the audience as the person right next to this actor doing that thing, and being, being just in the moment. And I think that's Debra and I try to do the whole time we've been working together, is just be there with the actor and react to what they're doing and try and find the moments and the shots that tell the story. And that's been the most successful part of what I think we've tried to do together.
Well, we were talking to, I just think they're wonderful films. I wish there were more of them. But But there's quite a long time between her films. So I read you were working with Michael Moore at one time on Bowling for Columbine. And stuff.
I like I say, coming out of NYU, having that kind of those documentary chops about how to tell a story, simply how many shots you can get. I was doing reality TV. I was doing whatever I could to. By then, I had a place in New York and a mortgage, and you're trying to think, how can I? And I was working as a gaffer as well. I started working as a gaffer, a dolly grip, before I was, I was be shooting for free. And then you've got to go, okay, I've got to make this jump. I've got to start weaning myself off this paid job and start shooting. And you're shooting for free. And then you start to get some paid gigs. And I was doing reality TV. So you're trying to tell a story that an editor can cut with maybe 2 cameras in a room. And so you've really got to understand coverage. And that kind of leads into documentary filmmaking. And I was lucky to, I think Michael had seen a short film I had done that played at MoMA, the big film festival in MoMA, when they show shorts in front of a feature. And Michael had seen this little short I did for free in the city, and Fran McDormand was in it, and she was amazing.
Oh, wow.
She she wouldn't let us go downstairs without carrying an apple box or sandbag or something. She would never. She was absolutely fantastic. And that led in after, I think, a few months, Michael, chasing through the people that made the short, got in touch with me and said he was making this film and would I be interested? And he had started shooting it on Super 16, and they had covered some scenes like the Michigan militia and some really traumatic scenes of speaking to the principal, where the school where the initial shooting of this little girl had happened. But he was thinking he wanted to transition into digital, and it was around about the time I'd been shooting with a Sony 900, Panasonic Vericam. First one had just come out, and so we kind of went on the road. I couldn't get there was only 2 Vericams in the whole country, and we actually got them to shoot an REM music video that Michael directed as a kind of warm up for us working together.
Wow!
And we shot it. We went into a high school in Brooklyn with the Vericam, with the band, and with the school in session, and we just went around shooting this music video with the kids and the band. It was absolutely fantastic. But I couldn't get the Vericams long term. They were just demo models. So we went back to the Sony 900, a very small lighting kit, and went on the road for, I think, 2 months. Myself, a sound man, and a couple of producers, and Michael, and a driver. And we just went from city to city. And it was kind of incredible.
One point I read you ended up in Hollywood interviewing Charlton Heston, who kind of walked out a shot.
Yes.
Which one can imagine happening,
Yeah.
Do you basically prefer to work with smaller crews rather than larger crews, since so much of your start out was with small? And I'll tell you something, Roger would prefer to work with smaller crews.
Yeah. I would say I like it all. I love the ability over time, with whatever your body work is, to have done smaller things that are very intimate, where it's just you, the camera, you're sitting hunched down on your knees and you're right next to the actor and you're relying on sunlight and a little bit of bounce and a little bit of negative fill. And that would have been more than half of, say, Leave No Trace, working with Debra. We were in the woods with a bounce board, a little bit of negative fill, and the camera. And I'm operating, and I have a little monitor in front of me with false color, and that's how I'm exposing. And I'm just trusting that the likes of many will capture everything that I hope is there.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I love, working with a crew and having all of those collaborators around me that have all of this other experience that they bring to bear. It's about solving problems. That's what's so interesting about it. It's like you're presented with a series of challenges, and then to get over those challenges, it's really a problem-solving exercise. And I love working with technocranes. But then I also love that other intimate filmmaking. And I think having that variety keeps it so fresh and so interesting, and different locations, different people. That's really, I think, the best thing about filmmaking.
And also, you switch back between TV and features. That's another 2 different worlds, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, you shot Leave No Trace with Debra. At the same time, I think you were shooting BOSCH, which is kind of one of our favorite TV series.
Yeah.
There's not many we love, but that one we really kind of love.
Yeah, I'd love being in LA. We kind of, it was interesting. I was in the UK. I'd moved to the UK for a couple of years, and I was doing this really lovely BBC projects, great cast, great directors, great writing, but no money, no budgets. And I was kind of struggling with what to do next. And my agents called up and said, "We've got this interview, we can send you the script. It's for a zombie prequel." And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't do that. You know what I do?
I'd like to see it.
And it was Fear the Walking Dead. It was the precursor to The Walking Dead. It was how this whole thing started. And I read the script. God, I can't even imagine this. But let me do the interview. And it was a Zoom interview or a Skype interview back then. And I interviewed with the showrunner, Dave Erickson, and Adam Davidson, who was going to direct the pilot. And I just thought, God, those are guys I'd love to go and have a drink with. I could really enjoy this. This could be really fun. And myself and my wife went out it was winter in Glasgow, and we ended up in Venice Beach in this lovely Airbnb.
Very seductive.
And December, January, and we're looking at each other going, what the hell are we doing in Glasgow?
Yeah.
So we came out to do the pilot and spent a month in LA doing that. And then that went to series. The rest of the series was shot in Vancouver, which was a lovely experience in itself. In the meantime, I went and did a pilot, Budapest, I think with Alan Ball. And by the time that was done, the offer came, the series is going to go. Would you come and do the series? So we went to Vancouver, and then second series went to Mexico. And at that point, we decided to put all of our house in Glasgow in storage and make the move to the US for 3 years.
Right.
And that was in 2015. So just one thing led to another. And I remember actually getting the pilot script for BOSCH. And I asked my agents, would they pay for someone to come in from out of town? And they said, no, you had to be local. So I didn't even read it. And then 3 years later, it came back around again, and I became one of the alternating DPs on the show with an old classmate from NYU, Patrick Cady. And that allowed us...
Patrick, we know Patrick, yeah.
Yeah, and that allowed us to be in LA, to kind of live dream of working in film, working in TV, and living in LA. And I was really grateful for that time working on BOSCH.
You got a very good period for it back then. It's maybe not quite the same now. But I'm interested. Did you take the kind of what you'd learned working with Debra and the documentary experiences? Did you take some of that to The Walking Dead and BOSCH, and vice versa? Did you know?
Well, also, The Walking Dead and BOSCH must have been much more planned out before you even walked on set.
Yeah, it's hardly you with a camera and a bounce board, is it? I don't know.
No,
maybe
well,
it is.
There's an element of, I would say, Fear the Walking Dead, you're creating something kind of from scratch. It's a world that doesn't exist, or maybe does. But, there's a bit of room there. There's a bit of leeway. I definitely think the things that I enjoyed about working documentaries, the simplicity, a bounce light, soft light, that will always play. I think going back to French New Wave, that those kind of simple, beautiful ways to light will always play. I guess trying to get an eye light, so there's always a little bit of life in the eyes is a big thing for me. So you try and get that in, but you can do that simply. You can do that I can do that on Debra's films as well. And very, stripped down, minimal films. You can always make sure there's an eye light. I do think that's an important thing. But yeah, working with the bigger crews, I would take their experiences on board and then try and bring some of my simplicity. Being realistic, a lot is expected. A cinematic look is expected on a TV show these days. A lot is expected very quickly. And I've always kind of said to myself, I'll do the best I can in the time I'm given. And I'll make it look as good as humanly possible, but I'm not going to get bent out of shape. If I can't get this or I can't get that, or we don't have the time to do this. And I think that's, I feel okay when I look back at the series I've done that, it's looked as good as it could in the circumstances. And partly that is, as you say, bringing experiences of when you've got 5 minutes to shoot a scene. That happens in big shows and it can happen in little shows. There was a moment in the first film with Debra, Down to the Bone, where at the very end of the film was Vera and Hugh looking at each other through a door, a glass door, like an exterior, like a screen door. And we had it doesn't look like it, but we had about 5 minutes of daylight left to shoot that whole scene. And I kind of set up a tripod and I set up the camera, and I realized as they came together, there was this beautiful reflection thing happening. Debra sees it in the monitor and we're like, oh my God. And so I basically grabbed the camera on my shoulder, got rid of the sticks, and we shot her side on the shoulder so I could move, make little adjustments, keep that reflection just so their eyes were over each other, and then jump inside and say, okay, go again, and jump inside. You don't cut, you just keep rolling, you get the other side of it, and then we've got the end of the movie. And I have to do that on projects like Down to the Bone, but I have to do that as well on larger budget projects. There's times where to get that moment, you've really got to have that instinct to just jump in and do it dirty.
And also trust that it's going to work.
Yeah, but I mean, also how different it is, though. Are you working like on Walking Dead and BOSCH? Is that multiple cameras, though? Are you still operating? How does that instinctive kind of reaction to something kind of translate down through such a huge crew. That's why I've always had a problem with huge crews and operators.
Right. Because
I love operators,
yes,
but you just
you mostly
want to be
operate.
the one that's, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like in a multi-camera shoot, you kind of have to be multi-camera to get the amount of material in the schedule you've got. And I kind of feel if I'm going to do my job as managing the images, in the service of the director, then I've got to be looking at all of those images. So I'm kind of, I feel like I try and smartly hire the operators I know will have the ability to, it's always about, you say, tell the story. Like, whatever your shot is, there's 2 or 3 shots going on at the same time. Here's your story, tell your story, and feel confident telling your story. Don't be hesitant in going from A to B to C. Tell your story. And so I feel like I'm managing all of the cameras at that stage, and I want to keep eyes on all of those. Obviously, it's different with Debra, where you're mostly single camera, sometimes 2 cameras, where you really are just focused on that, 1 camera at a time. But, for example, I just came off the Mayor of Kingston. We had 4 cameras the entire season, 5 cameras towards the end. And again, it's about managing. It's trying to, because sometimes, even with the greatest cameras, even with Alexa 35, the roll off is a little bit different. It's not so forgiving if your highlight goes that it would be on negative. And so I really want to keep eyes on that. And to be honest, I've 4, 5 handsets, iris controls in them, especially in Mayor of Kingston the last season. There was a lot of sun in and out of cloud, a lot of exterior, and it would be cloudy and then it'd be sunny. And I was really, it's a kind of dance that goes on of just trying to hold the shot, trying to save the shot, trying to hold that highlight, so that there's something when we go into the DI that we can make. We can make it the best it can be.
Isn't it a danger, though, that the technology, the technique sort of takes you away from that sort of spontaneous kind of, the core of the storytelling, really, which is more of an emotional thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I think in a show like that, where there's a lot of cast, there's a lot of moments happening at once. And I think the best thing about multi-camera is everyone can act, everyone can emote, they can emote for their acting scene partner, and nothing's getting thrown away. They're not doing it. It's not an over the shoulder where, they can give everything and there's a camera getting it. And if my job, it can be challenging, but I try and make them, as many of the cameras and all of the cameras, look as good as possible. And then it allows it allows the actors to give everything every moment.
But you're also having to make compromises because of the fact that there are multiple cameras all along the way. So I guess that also keeps you on your toes, because you got to make the best compromises that you
Right. That's
can.
absolutely. And I think that's where some experience comes in, that it really is about, someone said all of filmmaking is compromising, but in a sense it's you're trying to make the best of each setup. And I'm in New York doing a single camera romantic drama because it just appealed to me. The subject appealed to me. There was a lot of, it was heavy drama in Pittsburgh and Mayor of Kingston, an element of violence, and just the way the world is at the moment. I read the script and I just instantly responded to it being about touching, looking, speaking, just this really basic human contact and the ability to, okay, we can do this. This can be single camera. I can light every shot as well as I possibly can in the time given. And so that is such, for me, it's a real reset. It's a real, it's an emotional and physical reset to be doing this different film. And then it'll give me huge energy to go back into something else.
Yeah, no,
in
it's
the
great
future.
to make the changes, isn't it? How do you reckon you learnt to light? I mean, you say you worked as a gaffer for a while. I mean, how did you learn lighting? Or can you learn lighting? Is it instinctive? Is it just looking at all that kind of equipment you can use and just finding it yourself?
I think it's a little bit instinctive, but I think you can learn. I think you can look at painting and photography and learn certain things about. You can develop your taste through that, and then you can look at the equipment and you can play around with them, and you can think, well, how can I make that do that? How can I make this light act in this certain way so that when I've got a subject from the camera, I think it's a great exercise to take a well-known painting or a well-known photograph and then try and take a certain number of lighting units and figure out how can I match that, because you learn what the lights do and don't.
And isn't it also that you look at it and you go, why does this frame move me and this frame doesn't?
Yeah.
Because I think you have to relate it to yourself. Otherwise, you're copying and you're just saying, well, everybody else says this looks good.
Yeah, exactly. It's a taste thing. So I would say if you were going to do some exercises like that, you would choose the things that you're attracted to, like the paintings that you like, the photographs you like. And then you can work on that exercise on kind of recreating. But it's also, I think, at the point at which you decide you're going to be a photographer or a DP, you should just be looking at light all the time. I do it all the time. I'll wake up in the morning and there's a shaft of light coming in through the edge of the curtain. There's some kind of movement in it. And I'm imagining, before I've had a cup of tea, I'm imagining, I wonder, how would you do that? And then through your experience of working with different units and on different projects and doing different kinds of lighting, I think you can, and sometimes you're combining different things, one on top of the other to get that effect. Lighting diagrams. I've looked at yours, Roger, extensively. And
maybe you could understand them. I can't.
I remember I was at film school and I went off to do additional electric work on a commercial that was being shot in the city. And Vilmos, who's one of my all-time favorite DPs and people, was shooting. I think it was like an AT&T. It was a big commercial all over different cities all over the world. And he had to be doing this spot in New York. And I got brought on as 20th electric or something. And I was watching, I found myself watching what he was doing. And I made some of my own personal diagrams as to, like, he would, have his hard light and then he would bring in 2 or 3 different levels of diffusion with open ends and kind of feather them almost like opening a book. And that made this incredible wrap. And so I was, oh, that's interesting. And the really nice thing was, it was the very first digital camera. It was this huge camera with this huge cable to the monitors. It was the first HD camera. So I could actually really see, if I stood over his shoulder on set long enough, I could see the lighting, what he was doing with the equipment, the grip equipment and the lighting equipment on set. And then I could take a quick look at what was the outcome instantly. And I think I learned a lot from that. I made a bunch of diagrams. I got caught by the gaffer. I got in trouble. But our teacher at NYU used to bring Vilmos in once a year to do a week's worth of lighting classes at NYU. And I think I fessed up to him. I brought the diagrams in and I fessed up. Right. And he was touched. I think he appreciated the application of,
I don't see why he wouldn't.
Trying to learn.
I always found him very generous with his,
he was amazing.
I mean, I think there's a difference too when you're doing that to try and learn and try and understand than the people who are just doing it as a cheat sheet to go, I'll just use this just exactly the same. There's a big difference.
I think there's also, I think one of the things I learned is in my head is I read something, I think it was James Wong Howe said when he was on one of his last movies, he said, I wish I had a bit longer in life because I used to light a set with 60 lamps and now I'm down to 10. I think if I had another 5 years or so in this game, I could get down to 1. That's what I really want to do. I thought that was really telling. I mean, it's obviously exaggeration and depends on the set, but I thought that was very telling. A man like him wanted to just simplify everything,
Absolutely. No, I do think it's not about getting older, or maybe it's a bit of experience, but it's I aspire to use less. I aspire to do things in a more simple way. I definitely look at some images and feel, oh, that's overlit. I look back at it. I'm in the color suite doing an episode of a show even, and I'm looking, I'm saying, that feels overlit. Can we bring it down? And I aspire to much simpler lighting. And then I'm doing the project I'm doing right now, or I'm working with Debra or something, and you have to try and work with less, because there's no point in having a full truck of lights and you only have 2 or 3 crew members to manage them. So I think, try to do that clean, very clean image, and let the negative space not have to feel you have to light everything light. In many ways, like, there's so much interest in the darkness. You give the audience,
yeah,
something to imagine themselves, if not everything is presented.
Right. I actually think, I mean, I kind of, some people say, well, the great cinematographers wouldn't have really warmed to digital technology. And I remember having a conversation with Conrad Hall one time, and he said, oh yeah, I just really want to shoot digital. I mean, that was way before there was that. And I'm sure people like James Wong Howe would have embraced it. Don't you think? I mean, it just gives you so much more possibilities in the freedom you have to do the natural light you can use, the instantaneous reaction you can get from a director.
Absolutely. I think, I've heard you say it before, but it's that sense that you go home at night with the comfort that you've got the scenes you plan to do that day, and you've got them in a way that you're hopefully happy with, and your director's happy. I did a whole film with Terence Davies, Sunset Song, and every shot was on wheels. It was this language that Terence loved, and I would basically, even in the stage, wheels, like the dolly with an Ari head, was moving remotely, so I was sitting just offset with the wheels.
Yeah.
Terence was sitting next to me. We both had 24-inch monitors that were perfectly loaded, so I was seeing the image as it should be, and I could just keep out of the corner of my eye seeing, is Terence happy?
Yeah,
and
his reaction
to it, and it was a wonderful experience. We also shot 65mm Meg on that project for all the exterior landscape work, and just by the nature of
why was that? I was interested in that because we were watching it the other night.
Yeah.
Why was that?
I think it's such a loved book. It's considered that historically the Scottish people's favourite novel of all time, Sunset Song, Lewis Classic Gibbon. And it was such a revered thing that I think we wanted just to add to the landscape. The landscape is such a character within it. And living at this kind of the farming life and the seasons and all of that. And I think it was just to, in a sense, tip our hat to that landscape, and to do that with this large canvas. And we had to fly down to New Zealand to shoot the Scottish harvest, because we were filming in a non-harvest period in Scotland.
Wow.
And so we flew to New Zealand and did these harvest scenes, and every shot, it was a 765, so it was extremely heavy, was off a crane and a remote head. And we'd set up the crane and basically do every shot in a scene from that one piece of track and that one crane. And I had this amazing key grip who had done all the Lord of the Rings films. His name was Spotty. I'm trying to remember his last name, but he was amazing. I really relied on him down there. And so, we shot the 65 in the landscape. But interestingly, in testing, I thought we had an Alexa studio, and I used the very first iteration of the master anamorphics. And when I looked at the two together, they were virtually, the 65 neg was virtually grain. It wasn't grain free, but it was very, very clean. And so using the Alexa in the studio and the 65 in the landscape, I thought they cut together pretty well.
Yeah.
I noticed behind you, it seems like you've got a whole wall of reference images. Presumably that's for the film you're about to
That's for the upcoming film.
shooting.
I love to have visuals around me.
How different is it from director to director? I mean, Terence Davies, did he have his own kind of lookbook? Did he have some very specific kind of visual sense in mind?
There was a Danish painter, Wilhelm Hammershøi, very much like Vermeer's window light, but with much more muted colours and a softer contrast. But it was very much it was sort of a Scandinavian version of The Girl with the Pearl Earring. It was this very soft light through windows.
Right.
And he was kind of in love with this look, and it was fairly desaturated. So that was what he brought to the table, and that was kind of where we started. And I was using a lot of soft light and side light and letting it be contrasting, let it drop off in that kind of chiaroscuro kind of way. That was his kind of main approach. And then the locations, in a sense, kind of spoke for themselves. But that would have been a major influence on that film particularly. Yeah, there's usually, I'll definitely have a big collection of books, art books, art photography books. And I would go through those usually and start to pull, when we read a script first, start to pull images that kind of speak to me about the script. And then that starts the conversation with the director and the production designer about how is this ultimately going to look. I remember The Verdict is one of my favorite films, and Sidney saying, he brought a book of Caravaggio paintings to Andrzej Barkowiak and said, I really want to go down this road. And when I see the film, I completely see, where they were coming from, where the starting point was. And it's wonderful photography.
How much do you do in post in the DI?
I've always tried to think of like shooting film, shoot a healthy negative.
Yep.
Start out 2/3 overexposed and go from there. And I've tried to bring that into, digital cinematography as well. I really, when I'm first creating, there's always that time on set where the director would say, I want it to be darker. I know I get a shudder, and because I'm monitoring on set, and especially a few years ago with the 900 or something, I would always start with a fairly heavy LUT, a little bit like 2/3 overexposed and negative, a fairly heavy LUT, so that even when we go dark on it, I know underneath when I strip that LUT away that there's a healthy negative there. That's a good amount of information, and that's kind of my approach to this. And so I feel like if I never want to be opening up something that's way underexposed and then it's just getting noisy. I'm much happier bringing things down and having it just
there was a
clean.
Very famous director a few years ago, I won't mention, but in the early days of video assist, and he was looking at the monitor and kept saying darker, darker, darker. And he was just looking at a little monitor. When they got to the projection screen, it was totally unusable.
Yeah.
So they had to reshoot the whole thing, which is...
I vividly remember some of my early like F900 shoot days being kind of driven into those corners, go darker, darker. And I do, I have some unpleasant memories of sitting in a DI suite later and really struggling to dig out what I would want to from there. So from that point on, I really started to shoot some tests, create some LUTs, and push them down, knowing that it's kind of where a lot of people want to go, but then having that information there that can come back. I've just been working with Mitch Paulson on Mayor of Kingstown.
Oh yeah,
been having a really great time with him. And this season we switched to Alexa 35, and it took a little bit of dialing in. It took a little bit in the first couple of episodes, and then I'd just done later episodes with him, and I felt really good that we really figured out how to work with this camera and how to within our story using our previous LUTs, and we really started to get the best out of it. I was super happy, and which is great.
There's a danger it gets very complicated. I kind of like often dream back to film, and maybe the idea even of shooting film in black and white and just, prime lenses, film stock, no digital finish. There's something very simple about that. It's amazing how we've got this wonderful technology, allows you to do all sorts of things, but in a way it kind of restricts you. In a way you feel less free in a way.
And I think it would be incredibly painful to shoot a film with so many LUTs and trying to remember which LUT that you use for which scene, and we're doing a new scene, which LUT do we use for the... I just think it's just simpler to shoot the scene the way you want it to look.
100%. I'm a huge believer in one LUT. Like the LUT is a film stock for me. So I'll create the LUT that gives that in pre-production that will be, here's what I think the film should look like. And we start, and you might make some minor tweaks as you start to get into some real location scenarios and real world scenarios that challenge it maybe too much, and you would make some tweaks. But I go with one LUT, unless I've got there's a flashback or something, or there's a different time period. But for the story I'm telling right now, I really, in digital cinematography, believe in one lot, and that's my film stock, or two lots, and that's my two film stocks. And then once I have that, the adjustments I make are on the lighting and the iris, and I make those choices as I go along, but based on this one control, this one normal.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a big believer in that.
I think it's definitely can get way too confusing because you still have to go through the DI process, and still along there, the wrong LUT could be applied if things get a little confused, and it's confusing enough to finish a film.
Yeah. I didn't remember till we were looking up your credits, and James said you actually shot a film for Mike Radford, Elsa and Fred. I didn't know you worked with Mike.
I know. One of my biggest inspirations was Another Time, Another Place. I absolutely love that film. I actually got to know a little bit Phyllis Logan.
Yeah.
When I was just first getting into film, I photographed her down in London, and then I worked with her a little bit on Downton Abbey. And God, that was such a great film. And then to follow that up with 1984 with Mike.
A bit different.
A bit different, but I can see where both films come from, and they're inspiring. And the script came in, and it was Mike Radford, and I jumped at it. I would say it's a sweet film. It's not Mike Radford's best film ever. I feel grateful I got to work with him. I really enjoyed
he's
the
such a
process.
lovely guy. We had such good times. I mean, those two films, and then we did White Mischief in Africa, which was quite a trip as well.
Right.
But that was pretty wonderful. I loved Another Time, Another Place too. I thought that was... Mike was always, while we were shooting it, he was always questioning whether the film was any good. He was almost going through this real mental breakdown in a way, because he always thought the film was going to be Tree of Wooden Clogs.
Right.
Which actually, watching the other day, I'm glad it wasn't, because one is so far extreme, whereas Another Time, Another Place is very, it draws you in a much more intimate way, I think.
But it's great that he cares that much.
Yeah, he really cares. Yeah. So when were you working with Mike, did you create shots on the day with the actors, or did you storyboard? And just that sort of process?
I think we went to locations and we came up with a series of shots, but I do remember that. But I think it was definitely rehearsed, because they were very experienced actors. It was rehearsed.
Yeah.
Let's try and push it in a way that we can bring a nice backlight in through the window and then keep a soft light coming back on them. I try to, work with that. And I was using Crystal Express lenses, which are beautiful but challenging, but they're kind of beautiful in all of their aberrations. And I do remember we would mostly be blocking the scenes in the space and just working with the cast.
That's what I remember about him. I mean, we blocked one scene on 1984. I can remember we spent all morning blocking it, and a producer came in and said, "You got to finish. We got to start shooting." And Mike had the door of the stage shut from the inside. He wouldn't let anybody in while we were working out what the scene was going to be with the actors. It was just great, and we finished actually without going into overtime as well. So
he was amazing. He did this thing, and no one's ever done it with me since. I set up. Shirley MacLaine was amazing. All she had to do was walk out of her apartment building. It had an awning over it, and get in a taxi and drive away. That was the shot. And it was quite bright in the background. And I had lit it with a stand in, and I'd done what I thought. I had a book light coming in, beautiful soft light. And I thought, stand in looked great, and we got to do it. And set up the camera, rolling. Shirley walks out. She looks at the light. She turns around, walks back in. And I come inside. What's the matter? She's like, the light's in the wrong place. And I'm like, but Shirley, you looked amazing. And she's like, no, the light's in the wrong place. I'm like, can I just show it? And she said, no. And then it went on for about 5 minutes. And Michael was like, okay, so what do we want to do? And she's like, well, the light's in the wrong place. And I said, well, I'm not relighting it. She looks great. And he went, okay, moving on. And we literally just packed up and moved to the next location.
Wow.
It was kind of amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, that is.
But she was great. That was a great experience. I was shooting shooting some tests with her. All I had was my stills camera and a couple of chimeras. She's there and she's like, my God, if it wasn't for fucking chimeras, I wouldn't be working anymore. And she really understood that soft light concept.
Yeah, really, yeah. Oh. Yeah, well, I won't get into my horror stories. Anyway, but I wanted to ask you, if you're doing something like Fear of the Walking Dead or BOSCH, I mean, how much is the lighting of a scene left to you? I mean, you must have had fun on BOSCH because there's some of those night exteriors and, well, the night interiors, you can sort of play with the different colored lights. I really love that. I see it, there's kind of sodium and nobody's worried about these colors being extreme. Whereas you look back in cinematography, and Jack Cardiff would have not. The Technicolor guy who came with a Technicolor camera would say, yo, that light is too orange. You can't use that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What I loved about BOSCH was we really wanted to show LA, every side of it, the down and the dirty and the seedy and all the noir history and all of these aspects to it. And it's interesting because when we first started the show, there was a lot of sodium vapor in the city for night work.
Right.
And we loved it. And Peter Yambroka, who had been Michael Mann's producer for years on The Insider and various other shows. And that's actually how we ended up with the BOSCH house being in the same house that De Niro and his girlfriend were in the Hollywood Hills. That's the BOSCH house. And so we ended up, we'd take state beds up there every Friday and be stuck in the Hollywood Hills shooting night work.
Wow.
But he was a very big proponent of the multi-color, the multi-Kelvin light that goes on in LA at night. And then when LA started switching to a lot of LED night lighting on the streets, we actually ended up with a bunch. We would buy our own halide and sodium vapor bulbs, put them in housings, put them on crank stands and send them up and light whole scenes with just sodium vapor. Because we really wanted to try and hang on to that. You know?
Yeah. I remember shooting downtown once and they're on this bridge and they'd all gone to LEDs and I was beside myself. Yeah.
But Fear the Walking Dead, actually, because it was this new thing, it was actually, I think, Winter's Bone helped me get hired for that because Adam Davidson, the director for the pilot, he had loved Winter's Bone and he wanted a kind of realism to come into this world, this zombie world. He really wanted the audience to be like, oh my God, this is the real world and this is really happening. And that was kind of the starting point. And then we looked at a lot of photographers to kind of find inspiration, Todd Hido and even Eggleston and other people. We looked at a lot of photography. I thought the show was pretty colorful. I enjoyed how colorful that show was. And there's an opening scene in a little church up in Silver Lake. And, you know, we had a BB light coming through the stained glass windows just so that we could really play with those. And then all this craziness is happening within this beautiful church stained glass, multicolored light. So, you know, we try to make it feel real, but pretty, strangely, given the subject. And I really enjoyed that. We shot anamorphic. I'm just about to use G-Series again, and we used G-Series on that. And I really, you know, we did a widescreen version that I do remember showed in Poland. And we said, look how good this looks with 235. And then AMC were like, yeah, it looks great. Let's take it back to 16:9 to broadcast.
No.
So they just cut the sides off. But it was a shame. But I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's great to have the variations, isn't it? I want to ask the last question here.
Okay.
Looking back, what advice would you give yourself when you started out?
Advice I would give myself starting out is be open to as much influences coming from outside as possible. I would be trying to see as much of the making of projects as possible and try and understand what's being done and why it's being done. I think for me, spending one day on a set and just observing and then going away and reflecting on that is worth weeks or months of film school. Train your eye, you know, keep your own still photography going, train your eye, look at movies silent. I do that all the time. So that I can just really focus. I mean, it's what we do in the grading suite, but if I'm on an airplane traveling somewhere, I'll just sit there and watch a film, disconnected, just watching the pictures. And I feel like if you can understand the story without the dialogue, without the sound, without any music, then the storytelling is really getting somewhere.
Right.
They're really doing something right.
Bit of a problem now in a lot of more recent films, because it's all about the dialogue and it's not exactly Andrei Tarkovsky. You could watch Stalker without any sound. It would be a shame to do it, but you would know exactly what's going on.
Yes. Yeah, no, I really believe that.
Some of it's so dialogue.
Yeah. I think getting back to those kinds of basics, like shot progression, what are the transitions like? What am I looking at? How long am I looking at it for? I think that's really helpful. So studying film silently and trying to understand what story you're being told. I think, at the end of the day, the film versus digital, this versus that, what's the oldest thing that we do as humans? Is film and video. You go back to painting, photography, graphic reproduction. Prior to that, early painting. Before all of that, people were telling, and writing things down. Prior to all of that, people were telling stories. They were sitting around telling stories. And so I think telling stories is the core of it. You have to, every time you do a project, you're telling a story. What story you would tell. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what tool you're using. They're all just expensive hammers in a way, right? Which is, what is the story you're telling?
That's true.
Yeah. That's well put. Great. I'm with that one there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for doing this.
It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been lovely.
Yeah.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.